This is James Dutton for Slothbox, sponsored by the Excelsior Sporting Club. And today I'm joined with Damien Denny. Damien, how are you?
I'm fine, James. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good.
Yeah.
Today, the plan is to talk a little bit about your career in the ring and outside of the ring, behind the camera, the movies as well.
Yeah.
I want to start there, really. I want to start with Daniel Day-Lewis and your relationship. And obviously, you trained Daniel Day-Lewis for the film The Boxer. Just talk to me
Yeah.
a little bit about that and how that came around.
Well, it came through Barry McGuigan. He put me forward for like a screen test. Put me out of the blue, James, out of nowhere, and uh, went down to Dublin, screen tested for 3 days, and got the part. And the rest is says history. I was with him on a daily basis for about with Daniel that is for about probably a good 7 months. Myself and Barry was every day we trained, we sparred, we done pass, done bags, skipped. Just you just lived the life of a professional fighter, and it was my job to bring him on in his role. So that's what I done.
So you mentioned obviously Barry was there as well. What was your role? Was your role to train Daniel Day-Lewis, or was it just to spar with him and, as
Well,
if he was one of your stablemates?
yeah, well, no, I think initially it was for a part in the movie, and but sort of one was sort of feeding off the other because we got on really well. Um, our sparring sessions were really good sparring sessions. I didn't obviously go flat out on him, but didn't go easy on him either. There's no point in that. So I brought him along at a slow pace, and I think from I got involved, Barry had been training for about a year, sort of sporadically, doing sessions with him, but Barry didn't do any sparring with him. I done all the sparring up until we started shooting the movie. So um, yeah, he was a very good fighter. He was 40 at the time, so he was obviously past it, but dedicated to beyond belief.
And this was what I mean. The film was released what, 97, 98, sort of.
Yeah, it was shot in 97, released in 98. And it's
No,
hard to believe it's like 25, 26 years ago. It seems like yesterday when I speak about it. And
no.
it pops up every now and again on the Sky Classics and stuff and the odd sort of regional movie channel stuff. So yeah, it's lovely memories for me. It was great icing on the cake. I had retired from boxing for about 3 years, and obviously thought my boxing career was finished. Didn't know I was going to go to Hollywood and uh, go on a university studio movie and be on set for like 7 months. So magical.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of fighters struggle after retirement. When they've left boxing, something that a lot of fighters done pretty much all their lives, and they do
Yeah.
struggle to leave it behind and hang up their gloves. Was this
Yeah.
for you a savior in a way? Did you struggle with retiring from boxing?
Do you know what? Looking back on it, I did. I think sometimes when you're in the midst of things, you don't realize it. But I dedicated my life for 20 years. I boxed from I was 9 year old up until I was 28, and it was all I ever. It was all I ever wanted to do. It was all I ever wanted to be. Was a world champion. I was Irish champion, medalist at the Commonwealth Games, and I was just progressing where I thought I was going to be a world champion as a pro, but things didn't work out. And then all of a sudden, in the space, well, I sort of knew about 6 months before it because the desire was out of you. The desire had sort of the fire was going out, and I wasn't able to get myself up for fights, and sort of I had sort of semi-retired, and the guy was looking after me. Owen McMahon says, "I've got you like a title fight, a WBO Intercontinental title fight. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course we'd be interested." Thinking it was going to be maybe against some former world champion who was on his way out, maybe a guy lesser down the rankings. They got me Paul Silky Jones. You know, wasn't exactly the easiest, an easy challenge for a title, but I still fancied myself to win the fight. But Paul Silky said after that he thought he was coming over to lose. He ended up knocking me out in the first round, which was a massive loss for me in Ulster Hall. I'd never been beaten in Ulster Hall as an amateur or pro, and all of a sudden I had the embarrassment of being stopped in the first round on Sky TV in front of my home fans. And I don't think I came out of the house for about 2 or 3 weeks after it. And I was down about it, and it still hurts me to this day because it was my last fight. Looking back on it, I probably should have taken another fight just to erase that memory of the losing night. Because there's plenty of winning nights, there's plenty of great nights, but your last one should have won you remember. So
Is
yeah.
that is that a regret for you not taking one more after that?
Do you know, James, it is because, as I say, it's not nice to go out in a loss. But having said that, boxing is a dangerous game, and I knew that I wasn't going to go to the top, so I wasn't going to hang about to be and also around. Like I wasn't going to be cannon fodder for some young novice coming through and being used as a stepping stone. So, but I think I should have took one more fight just to say to go out and say I won my last fight. But
No.
it's all water under the bridge now. But getting back to the question, I do think it was. I think maybe depressed is a word bandied about too easily, and I'd say it's probably down. And you sort of think, right, what am I going to do now for the rest of my life? When you've dedicated your whole life to being something that you think you're going to achieve stardom and richness and security out of. Very few make that, James. Very few make the pinnacle. Loads try. The ones that you see are on the tip of the iceberg. So fair play to anybody that makes a living out of professional fighting. You have to tip your hat to them. But I think it was
Absolutely.
probably down. So the film sort of got me back into, well, it certainly got me back into shape again because I had to lose me 3.5 stone. I'd put it on. I went from like, well, I think it was 10 stone 13 my last fight, and till I got the part in the movie, I think it was 14 10. So it was like was that 4 stone there? 4 stone, So, but Barry McGuigan said, let's move a few months before we shoot your scenes. And you'd be training every day, you'd train twice a day. So they got me back into shape again for sure.
That soon came off, yeah.
Mm,
Take me back to the beginning. Do you remember your first day in a boxing gym?
I do,
What
yeah.
do you remember about it? Why is it still fresh in your memory?
It was the smell. It was a proper old sawdust boxing club in Lisburn where I grew up. It was called the Key Club. It was a club that had been there for, well, certainly 100 years anyway. Showers in it were freezing. The bags in it were rock hard at the bottom. They were like cement in the back where all the sand, I think, had compacted. I remember having bruised knuckles when you were a kid coming home. Not you maybe getting a letter to say you couldn't write in school because your hand was in a bandage because your knuckles were bruised. Quite a small ring, saggy ropes. It was upstairs. Downstairs was the showers and like a wee committee room. And just the smell, there was no heating in it. The showers were absolutely freezing cold. Obviously now to say that does you good. We were standing maybe 4.5 stone, 5 stone, absolutely shivering ourselves to death in the cold shower. But fond memories, it was a proper old boxing club. And
And
I actually won the first All Ireland title out of there when I was 13. Yeah.
what took you to the boxing gym? Why did you want to start boxing?
Probably boredom. So yeah, it wasn't a lot to do. I was born in '66. So we're talking, I started with 9, so 1975. There wasn't really a lot. There was no real leisure centres, sports clubs. There was none of that stuff. We had a swimming pool in the town, a couple of football clubs, and a boxing club. So I was never going to be a good swimmer. It was okay at football. Didn't really like team sports because you relied on other people. I'd sort of work my socks off. You pass the ball, then they'd give the ball away easily. I think, well, it's not for me. Boxing, solitary, and you only need yourself to blame. So,
So you mentioned a little bit about your pro career already and
yeah.
what your ambitions were. Talk to me about your amateur career, very successful. How proud are you of your amateur accolades?
The only one regret I have, James, I didn't go to the Olympics. I
Mm.
should have went to the '88 Olympics. I was on the squad. Turned pro with Frank Warren '87. So because I've done Commonwealths, Europeans, and World Championships, and the only one I missed was the Olympics. And it's nice to say you're an Olympian.
Mm.
But again, I become disillusioned with it. I broke my hand against, funny enough, fighting Ireland against England. A guy called, uh, well, no, I actually stopped a guy called Keith Wall, and there was a Dublin International. So when you get stopped, you were banned for 28 days. So he couldn't fight me. We fought them in the National Stadium in Dublin on the Friday. And then it was the first time ever an England team had boxed in Belfast because of the troubles. They never came north. They always went to Dublin. But they'd been assured that everything would be safe. So they'd done a Dublin International, one in Dublin, and then 3 days later in Belfast. Because I'd stopped Keith Wall, he was banned for 28 days. So I had to fight a middleweight, come night middleweight, Damien McCoobray, and I broke my hand on him. And that sort of put me out. I was sort of starting my hand trouble because I broke my hands 4 times as a pro. Um, but the Olympics was the one that. But my proudest moment probably was winning my first Irish senior title. That was probably my proudest moment because nobody gave me a chance to do it, and I stopped the guy in the second round, the reigning champion. So
What's it like to do that when nobody backed you to do so, but you've gone out there and done it?
I think when you're young, you're sort of naive to all these things. If you're looking back on it now, like remember like sitting reading the papers, they give you the profile of who you're fighting. This was my first international was against Wales. But the Irish senior championships as well. I was very much the underdog. And if you've been reading them when you're older, you probably think, oh, I'm not going to win it. But when you're young, you're fearless. It just got on. It was more or less like, well, I'll try and prove these was wrong. My dad always instilled belief in me. My coach, Michael Hawkins, always instilled massive belief in me. There's nobody better than you. They've only got two arms, a head, two legs, just like you. So you get out there and do your best. So, and that's why I always give it my best shot.
That's what you can do. And yeah. Some of the highs, but in boxing, we know it's highs and lows.
Yeah.
You've mentioned, injuries, and you've mentioned becoming disillusioned with the sport. Just talk to me about the lows and how low does boxing get for people?
For me personally, when I lost my first fight to Dale Bryan for a final in there for British title, that was a big dip, and then everything, the confidence, everything sort of just drained away because I lost an unbeaten record. And there's such an emphasis put on an unbeaten record that you sort of thought, well, is my manager going to want to know me? Is the TV company going to want to know me? There's a lot riding on it. There's a lot of pressure in there. And you're sort of only 2 or 3 fights away from, next, the conveyor belt keeps moving. You fall off it. There's another 4 or 5 fellas waiting to take your place. So the first, and I probably took it too badly because there was a lot of problems going into that fight. I had to lose loads of weight. I lost like 26 pounds to get back down to welterweight. I was outgrowing welterweight. It killed me to do it. And he beat me, I think, by a point and a half on the night, over 10 rounds. But then I think after that, a lot of self-doubt came into on my. But instead of just saying, right, I know what, or I've lost this because I had to lose too much weight and my preparation wasn't right. It wasn't that it wasn't good enough. I think it was a better fighter with Dale Bryan. He went on to win the British title. He beat Kirkland 9 when they fought for the British title. And then he came over here and he knocked out Oscar Cheka, who was one of Barney Eastwood's rising stars. And Dale Bryan came over here. So Dale Bryan was always very underrated. And he was a fighter who would have been fighting loads, maybe not winning loads, but he was always sort of active. So he was always fighting fit. And where I hadn't fought for, I think, for about 6 to 8 months. We were always sort of coming out of retirement almost to try to fight. So that was probably my lowest point in the pro career. That first loss.
I want to pick up on a point you made there about the undefeated record and what comes with that. Now, at the moment, we see a lot of that because we say it's the Floyd Mayweather effect, or Joe Kawasaki, Andre Ward. Yeah. But back then, in the early 90s and 80s, was that still such a big thing? Was it, was it, for example, going, oh, well, Rocky Marciano done it, so we must do it? Was it still a big thing?
Yeah, it was a big thing, and especially I joined Frank Warren, and he had Georgie Collins. You remember George Boy Collins? Georgie was unbeaten in 35 fights. But I was sort of always pairing myself. George was a welterweight as well. He was slightly in front of me as far as experience as a pro, not as an amateur. But you sort of think, if he's had 35 unbeaten fights, everyone had 12 and I'd lost already. I was about 21, 22 years of age. And sort of these are wee doubts you have when you're going for a walk or going for a run and stuff like that. Where you're looking fighters around you. You had Chris Eubank unbeaten, and you had Nigel Benn unbeaten. Nigel came through the same sort of time as me, so did Eubank. And all these fighters coming through with unbeaten records. And there was a big emphasis. As I say, very few fighters go through their career unbeaten. You just name one of them, Joe Cole, Floyd Mayweather, two geniuses in the ring. People shouldn't put such an emphasis on, okay, I lost, pick up the pieces, I won't make that mistake again, and we'll try and rectify everything in the next fight. But it seemed to be, the boxing news was a Bible, and always unbeaten. So again, it's sort of inexperience and youth and stuff like that.
Just talk to me a bit about the the era you did come through at. You mentioned then Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank. This is all the time that you
Yeah,
came through, and it's a massive time for British and Irish boxing. It was
yeah,
pumping at the minute. Do you know what I mean? It was really really taken over to the forefront. Obviously, Nigel Benn and Eubank, I think, went out to America and things like that. And
yeah.
it's almost the faces of boxing. What was it like to come through at that time?
Again, I used to speak to Nigel quite often. He said his career just sort of catapulted. I remember standing in the back of the York Hall talking to him one night, and he said, he liked the way I fought. I was a box fighter. I could finish fighters very quickly and stuff like that. He said, oh, it's going to happen for you. Sort of listening to that as well. It's going to happen for you. It's happened for me. It'll happen for you. But like Nigel was an exceptional puncher. When he hit them, they went to sleep. So, but it was massive. ITV, Sky TV were just sort of starting to dip their toe into it. But ITV, terrestrial TV, everyone was getting recognised. If you were a star on ITV, well, how many people watched the Ben Eubank fight in the tent in Finsbury Park, the Barry McGuigan, Eusebio Pedroza fight, something like 19 million, 20 million watched it. Those figures, then they don't get those sort of figures. Boxing doesn't get those sort of figures anymore. So it was a magical time. The boxing news was like your Bible. Harry Mullen was the editor of it, and it was just the first thing you raced to get. I got mine on Friday. Was the boxing news, and first thing you went to was the rankings. It'd be amateur pro rankings to see what it was, and it was just a magical time. I don't think they have that sort of appeal anymore because everything's on the internet. I can speak to you today, or 1 minute, and it's on the internet the next minute. Where before it had to be written down, and it was magic. You got to touch the feel of the boxing news and stuff like that. It was a nice time to be boxing. Put it like that.
No, absolutely, definitely.
Yeah,
You mentioned already a little bit on it, but obviously retirement, and you retired still young, really.
yeah,
28, 29, did you say?
28. Yeah,
So 28 years old, you retired, and as you mentioned, a few years later, you've been fortunate enough to
mm,
get this part in this movie, and I believe he was in another movie as well.
yeah.
After
But I've
that,
done a couple of smaller things. I've done a thing called Fortune's Food for the Kelly family. Myself and Cornelius Carr, who fought Steve Collins for the world title, and ended up winning the world WB, IBF was it IBO, one of those titles he won. But the British champion as well. He beat James Cook for the British title. We done a small movie. It was like a 25-minute movie for film festivals and stuff like that. It was actually quite well received. The two boxing brothers, fell out over the death of their father in the ring. It was quite a nice wee story, and we played the two brothers, and we fell out, and then we ended up having a fight in the ring. And I killed the other brother. I killed Cornelius in the movie. It was well received. I done another small one called Slap, which had Joe Cole, who was in Peaky Blinders, quite a big actor. Um, Quite a good movie as well. I trained him for a part in the movie. Got a small part. We got one line in it. He was a young kid growing up in quite a rough area and liked to cross dress. That's why it was called Slap. That's not slap like slap or slap the makeup on. So he's putting makeup on him, but he was still a good fighter. So it was quite a good story as well. And I've done another smaller movie called The Boxer. Funny enough, not the same movie as the big one. For a young guy called Nick Dearman, who's based out in Hong Kong. He just come out of university in Bournemouth and asked me would I go down and choreograph and play a trainer part in it. I played the old Burgess Meredith part, the old Rocky trainer, trying to motivate my fighter. So I do bits and pieces. If anybody needs any, gets in contact with me, a fight choreograph, anything like that, that's what I'm available to do.
how are you finding that style? Was it an easy transition for you to go into the movie side of things and acting?
Do you know what it was? Maybe that's where I got the part. It was. I always feel most comfortable in or around a boxing ring because it's what I know. Maybe if you sit up and ask me to make a speech, what I have to do, I'm best man at my cousin's wedding next month in London, and then we're going to Italy. I'm petrified with making the speech. But put me in a boxing ring, I'd be taking something in the pads, training them, corner work. It's just everything just comes naturally. So I don't try and act. I just try and be what I've done all my life. So I think that comes through in camera. If you try and act, the camera picks up on it. So I just try to just forget about whatever who was around me, sound, things, lighting, makeup, whatever. Blank out all out and just concentrate everything in front of me. So if anybody's got any movies coming up, give me a shout and I'll go for it. We could do another one, James.
You mentioned obviously training actors to how to fight and how to box. Did you ever contemplate becoming a professional boxing trainer?
Well, I did take out my professional boxer's license and I trained young Ryan Green. Yeah, he was unbeaten in 10 fights. Got him into the semi final of the prize fighter, and who beat him? O'Kane. Eamon O'Kane beat him in the semi final of the prize fighter. And then he retired. I think he's subsequently come back. He came back there a couple of years ago and took another fight. I did. There's a lot of effort. I've got 5 daughters now, James, so I have a lot of time. They go from 21 down to 12. There's a lot of time in bringing children up. There's not a big reward for going and training fairs and stuff like that, and I just needed to make a living. It's something that possibly now I'm getting a bit older. The girls are starting to leave home. I could possibly dip my toe back into it. But it's not easy. It's not easy to do as well. People just think, oh, you're a good fighter, pass it on. Every fighter, every person has got different attributes. And some trainers, you still see it to this day. Excuse me. They train the fighters the way they done it. Fighters just can't do that. You have to be able to adapt to where your fighter, his best attributes, and just pass on your knowledge of what you have, but don't try and make him the fighter you thought you were or you were. And I think that's the problem with a lot of trainers at the minute. They're blindfolded by just it's all this. To see Mayweather doing all these fancy pad work stuff, and I don't know. I think that's all for show. I think Mayweather actually came out and said, he said that was it was for show. He said we weren't using that for any technique. It was just pure show. But you see the young trainers coming along and not name any, but they're doing all these fancy pad work sessions and stuff like that. So maybe to answer your question, maybe in the future I'll take the license back out again.
I mean, you clearly good at what you do. You're successful, and you seem very, very happy with life. And the last question I want to ask you, well, it's not a question as such; it's more for some advice. Somebody who has had a roller coaster of a career, ups and downs, highs and lows. What advice would you give to anybody who may be struggling or maybe hitting a dip and think there's no way back up again in their career?
Good question. I would think long and hard before I'd actually say that's me retired, obviously, because I regret it slightly now. But talk it through with whoever your partner is, whatever you're doing in your life. Think about it. Is the financial rewards there for the commitment you're putting into it? Just take long and hard and think about it. I think every fighter knows in their gut whether it's time to hang the gloves up. I think you'll get that gut feeling, and sometimes maybe fighters are blinded by money and they are sort of in the peripheral of world title fights and in around that sort of stuff, and big money's getting bandied about, which a lot of these fighters are. That possibly can cloud their judgment, but at the end of the day, if you go on, let's say you go on to your 40 years of age, which is still fit. 40-year-old Bernard Hopkins was absolutely amazing, but you have a very short time in your life to enjoy that money. The last thing you want to be doing is sitting, having mental problems, having possibly dementia, whatever. All the things that possibly come out of, say Parkinson's was brought on by boxing. You have a short time to enjoy what you've done a lot of time trying to earn a lot of money. So the first thing I would say would be come out of boxing with your health. You have to have your health to enjoy your wealth. So there's no point having all this money if you're sitting and you don't know who you are or where you're going, or your kids are on about night and you don't know who they are. So I would say number one, make sure you're healthy. So and then go by your gut feeling.
Fantastic. Damien, I want to thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that. I wish you all the best on your podcast.